Frank Gaffney, you join us, and Frank, I want you're going to break down, you're going to take what Kerry said yesterday, we're going to take it up one notch about Obama and about Obama in the Muslim Brotherhood and Obama in the Persians. But I just want to make that sure right there that Ignatius talks about Anthony Blinken going to Baghdad to meet with the Shiite militias and concern about the Shiite militias because the Persians, Iran, control Baghdad. After, 20 years of American effort, 8,000 young men and women dead, all of it. So walk us through the Obama responsibility. Let's start with the Muslim Brotherhood first. And I hate even calling this thing Hamas. Who knows what Hamas is, and who cares what Hamas is? The Muslim Brotherhood have franchises all over the world, and they've infiltrated the United States government. I know this for a fact because in all my efforts in the White House, which I had a pretty good run, the one thing I tell people that I had absolutely no lift at all, I got no traction, I was browbeaten and nothing happened, was to name the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And the reason, Frank, as you know, because you were helping me out on all the things in the White House, the reason that we didn't get any traction is the infiltration of the Muslim Brotherhood into the American government. And a lot of that, if not all of it, happened in Obama's term. I guess it even started earlier. So walk us through, Frank. Let's talk the Muslim Brotherhood. We're going to do Muslim Brotherhood on one side, the Sunnis, and we're going to do the Shiites, the Persians on the other. Let's start with the Muslim Brotherhood. Obama's culpability here.
Yeah, just a quick hello to Carrie Lake, who I'm a big fan of. We had a chance to meet in Phoenix a couple of months ago, and it's great to see you here. Listen, let me just set the stage, Steve. As I talked to you about before, this little pamphlet, which we published at the Center for Security Policy Press, you can get it there online if you care to. It talks about the mission of the Muslim Brotherhood being destroying Western civilization from within, by our hands and the hands of the believers. That is a document that was found in the Muslim Brotherhood archives back in, I think, the mid-1990s. Here's the point. There was a guy by the name of Abdurrahman al-Amoudi who I think kicked all this thing into gear in a serious way in the Clinton administration. As I talked to you about before, Steve, he hedged his bets. When the 2000 election was beginning, he wanted to make sure he had inroads to the Republicans as well. He lashed up with the guy you know called Grover Norquist, Karl Rove, to get inside the Bush campaign of 2000, and that translated particularly on and after 2011's attack, 9/11, into access to the administration. Big time. I believe from that moment to this, when they got George W. Bush after 9/11 to say Islam is a religion of peace, jihad is about personal struggle, the people hijacking these planes are trying to hijack a great Islamic or Abrahamic faith. All of that has created some of the abject confusion that gave rise, among other things, to a hopeless mission in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. We didn't understand who the enemy was. We didn't understand that by helping write constitutions, enshrining Sharia, the totalitarian Islamic code of Islam, in the text at American hands was just totally, obviously, a formula for disaster. The point is, bringing us to Barack Obama, there was all of that baked in. But he brought with him a youth spent marinating in Islam in Indonesia. He had a Muslim sponsor apparently pay his way through Harvard. He has been in the thrall of Islam, I think, from his earliest days. In fact, he famously told a blogger at one point, one of the prettiest sounds in the world is the Muslim call to prayer in the evening. This is the kind of guy who had, I think, a deep affinity for Islam and demonstrated it once he was president within 6 months, as Raheem just said, going to the heart of authoritative Islam, Al-Azhar University, and not only making a pandering, groveling speech that was, well, I think informed by Sharia supremacism, but he insisted that the Muslim Brotherhood be able to populate the first, I think, 3 rows of the auditorium. This was a party that was banned by the government of Egypt at the time, Hosni Mubarak's, and for good reason. They were enemies of our friends in Egypt. They were enemies of ours. He nonetheless began in that way, and in subsequent efforts, bureaucratic and otherwise, to submit to Islam. Notably in 2010, Steve, there were a slew of things, lexicons for the FBI in terms of discussing terrorism, the guidance out of the Pentagon for the Quadrennial Defense Review, a similar review out of the Department of Homeland Security, the National Counterterrorism Center. All of these things made it absolutely express policy of the United States government that you could not associate Islam, you could not talk about jihad, you could not talk about Sharia in any context relating to the threat that we were facing in the form of terrorism. And you know what's really interesting, Steve? A friend of ours, Steve Coughlin, did an analysis. He went through the 9/11 report, which was issued by the 9/11 Commission back, I believe, in 2004. And, you know, there are dozens of references to Islam and to Sharia and to jihad and so on. And from about 2010 forward, none of that appeared in any of these official documents of the U.S. government. Why? Because we were submitting to essentially Sharia, the blasphemy laws that say you can't in any way defame Islam. And that turned into, I believe, an emboldening of the Muslim Brotherhood, yes, that turned into the Arab Spring, that turned into the overthrow of Mubarak and others who were friends of ours. And by the way, put on, nitroglycerin, the efforts of the Muslim Brotherhood to not only build out infrastructure in this country, hundreds and hundreds of Islamic centers and mosques and other front groups, some of which, by the way, Steve, were identified by the United States government back in 2008 in the Bush administration as unindicted co-conspirators in the largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history, the Holy Land Foundation trial. And it's a who's who of the Muslim Brotherhood apparatuses and apparatchiks in this country. And the idea, we're told, was that list was supposed to be the follow-on prosecution to the Holy Land Foundation trial. But something happened in November of 2008. Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. That whole prosecution was shut down. And
unbelievable.
A few years later, you were trying to figure out how do we designate these guys,
and you couldn't
do it.
We're going to go into that prosecution later in the week with you. I've got Carrie here. I want to pivot now to Obama and Obama's regime in sponsoring the Persians and the Iranians, her case yesterday. Walk me through not only the Muslim Brotherhood sponsors, they were almost a bigger sponsor of the Persians, the Shiite version of our mortal enemy. Walk us through it.
Oh, I think in any term you wish to use, any measure of merit, it was vastly worse with respect to the Iranians. I have been told a fantastic story, and it may or may not be ready for prime time, but that Barack Obama was exhibiting enormous wealth when he was first elected to the United States Senate. And that when trap lines were run on it, the explanation was that he was getting money from the Iranians, which could explain an awful lot. His commitment, which Robert Malley was personifying in both the Obama-Biden 1.0 and 2.0 terms, with a short pause when he was a little too enthusiastic about Hamas. But he's brought back in to close the deal with the Iranians that came to be called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. He's also was, of course, featured prominently in Obama-Biden 3.0, the current administration. But yes, Steve, the Iranians were essentially appeased at every turn by Barack Obama. They were, I believe, given all kinds of inducements, of course, to get into this so-called deal. They were, a blind eye was turned towards their